Within the hour, police records pulled her up, a woman in her early 40s, one arrest for public intoxication, no fixed job, living alone on the outskirts of town. Once a choir singer at St. Michael's Church, now reduced to a name that neighbors associated with the smell of whiskey and the sound of broken glass. By sunset, Hollis and his team were standing in front of her house. It was small, half-collapsed in places, with a front porch that sagged under its own weight. The windows were dark, curtains drawn, and from somewhere inside came the faint hum of music, an old hymn, warped by static. The air outside smelled of damp earth and stale cigarettes. Hollis knocked. "Police!" No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Amelia Vaughn, open up." A shuffling sound came from inside, followed by the squeak of a lock turning. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a woman with tangled hair, pale skin, and eyes that looked as though they hadn't seen sleep in years. "What do you want?" she asked, voice rough and tired. "Detective Hollis," he said, flashing his badge. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Brian Cole." Her eyes flickered with something, surprise, fear, maybe even resentment, before she stepped aside. "Come in." The smell hit them first. Alcohol, smoke, and decay. Empty bottles littered the floor. Ashtrays overflowed on the table beside a stack of old church hymn books. On the wall hung a framed photo of a younger Amelia in a white choir robe, smiling beside a group of other singers. That smile was long gone now. She slumped into a worn-out armchair, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. "Brian," she muttered. "Haven't heard that name in a while. What's he done now?" Hollis took a seat across from her. "You tell me. You two were close." "Once," she said bitterly. "A long time ago." She exhaled, staring at the ceiling. "He was charming, I'll give him that. But he had secrets. Always did." "What kind of secrets?" She shrugged. "The kind men keep when they think they're smarter than everyone else. He thought I didn't notice when he'd sneak out late at night, or when he came back smelling like dirt and cigarettes." Hollis leaned forward. "What do you mean, dirt?" She laughed softly, a sharp, hollow sound. "You think I didn't see? He used to spend hours by that stupid kennel. Said he was fixing it for the dog. But one night I heard noises. Digging. Like he was burying something." The room fell silent. Hollis watched her carefully. "You didn't tell anyone?" She looked down, her expression tightening. "I tried. But who'd believe me? I was drunk half the time. The police would have thought I was making it up." "Amelia," Hollis said, his tone measured. "Nora Adams's gown was found buried under that kennel. You're saying you heard Brian digging there?" Her hand froze midair, the cigarette trembling between her fingers. "Her gown?" "Yes." She went pale. For a moment, she looked as if the breath had been knocked out of her. She pressed a hand to her forehead. "God," she whispered. "I didn't know. I thought it was something else. Maybe the dog. What did you think he was burying?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "A box. I saw something wrapped in cloth once. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know." Hollis's eyes narrowed. "Where were you the night Nora Adams disappeared?" Amelia looked up slowly. Her lips trembled. "I don't remember." "That's not good enough." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was drunk, all right. I don't remember. He'd left me by then, said he couldn't take my mess anymore. I stayed home. I swear I didn't leave that night." Hollis stood, the air between them thick with tension. "We'll confirm that." She looked up at him, desperate now. "You think I hurt that little girl? I might be a drunk, but I'm not a monster." He didn't answer. He simply signaled to his officers. As they left the house, Hollis paused on the porch, the night air cold against his face. Something about Amelia's reaction didn't sit right, Not the words, but the fear in her eyes when she heard about the gown. Whether she was hiding guilt or the truth, he couldn't yet tell. But one thing was certain: the case was far from over. And for the first time since Nora vanished, someone other than her parents was about to face the full weight of suspicion. For 2 days, Amelia Vaughn sat in the cold gray cell of the county police station, her eyes sunken and her mind spiraling. The air reeked faintly of bleach and metal, and every passing hour was marked by the hum of flickering fluorescent lights overhead. She had barely eaten, barely spoken. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, a ghost of the woman she once was. Detective Hollis had seen many kinds of guilt in his career: the loud kind that ranted, the quiet kind that cried, and the hollow kind that hid behind silence. Amelia's was the third kind. When he entered the interrogation room on the third morning, he carried no files, no tape recorder, no paperwork, just a small cup of water and a weary look. "You haven't spoken in 36 hours, he said quietly, setting the cup in front of her. "You want to tell me why?" She didn't look up. Her fingers played absently with the hem of her worn sweater, the nails chipped, the skin raw. "I have nothing to say," she whispered. "You had plenty to say when we first met," Hollis replied, leaning against the wall. "You talked about Brian, about the digging, about the things you heard." Her eyes flickered for a moment, then dimmed again. "That was before I realized how you'd twist it." "No one's twisting anything," he said, pulling up a chair. "We found Nora's gown buried in his yard. You said you saw him digging. Then you said you didn't know what he buried. Now, I'm wondering, which version is true?" "I told you," she muttered, staring down at her hands. "I was drunk that night." "Drunk doesn't mean blind." Hollis's tone was calm, measured, the kind that chipped away at denial one word at a time. "You saw something. You know something. And I think you're scared, not of us, but of what happens when you finally say it out loud." Her breathing quickened, her fingers curling into fists. "You don't know what you're talking about." He studied her for a long moment before saying softly, "Then help me understand." She finally looked up, her eyes bloodshot, her voice shaking. "Why do you even care? She's probably dead by now." Hollis's face didn't change. "That's not your call to make." Silence stretched between them, and then something inside Amelia cracked. Her lip quivered, her shoulders trembled. She pressed both hands to her face and began to sob, deep, painful sobs that echoed through the sterile room. Hollis said nothing, letting her break. The tears poured out like a flood she'd been holding back for years. When her crying finally quieted, she spoke, her voice fragile but clear. "I loved him," she whispered. "God help me, I loved him." Hollis leaned forward slightly. "Brian." She nodded slowly. "He made me feel alive again. After my divorce, after the church turned their back on me, he was the only one who looked at me like I still mattered. We used to meet at his house every weekend, cook dinner, talk about starting over somewhere new. He told me he loved me too." Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, almost like she was reliving a dream. "But then I got pregnant," she said, her tone dropping to a whisper. "He didn't even let me finish the sentence before he said he couldn't have a child with me. Said it would ruin his reputation. He called me foolish. Told me to take care of it." Hollis's face tightened. "You mean he begged me to abort it," she said, her voice breaking again. "I didn't want to. But I did. I thought maybe if I did it, he'd stay. But the operation went wrong. I bled for days. The doctor said it damaged me permanently. I can't have children. Ever." Her hands trembled as she wiped her tears. "When I told Brian, he just left. Said he couldn't be with me anymore. Called me broken." The air in the room grew heavy. Hollis said nothing. He didn't need to. "I wanted him to hurt," Amelia continued, her tone darkening. "I wanted him to feel the kind of emptiness I wake up with every day. The kind that doesn't stop when you cry or scream. So, yes, I planned something. What did you plan? Hollis asked quietly. She hesitated, breathing hard. I wanted everyone to think he took that little girl. Hollis froze. What do you mean? Amelia looked away, shame flooding her face. The week before Nora disappeared, I saw her playing in the backyard with her mother. She was wearing that same gown, bright red, with little white flowers. Caught my eye. I knew the family was close with Brian. He always waved to them across the fence. So I thought, what if I could make them think he did something terrible? You're saying you tried to frame him, Hollis said slowly. Her shoulders shook. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Start from the beginning. She swallowed hard, her words tumbling out between sobs. I knew some men. Bad ones. From the bar where I used to go. They'd do anything for money. I told them I wanted to scare Brian, make it look like he kidnapped the Adams girl. I paid them with the little savings I had left. I said, don't hurt her. Just make her disappear for a while. Then I'll find a way to bring her back, and Brian will be ruined. Hollis's jaw clenched. You're telling me you arranged the kidnapping? Tears streaked down her cheeks. I thought it would be fake. Just a setup. They were supposed to take her for a few days, hide her somewhere safe, and then return her once the police blamed Brian. That's all. He leaned forward. And the gown. She nodded weakly. I told them to steal it. They climbed the Adams fence at night and took it from the clothesline. I told them to bury it under the kennel, right where he used to keep that dog. I wanted the police to find it there. I wanted him to rot the way I had. Her voice cracked. I thought it was justice. Where is Nora now? Hollis demanded, his tone sharp. Amelia's head fell into her hands. I don't know. He slammed his palm against the table. You hired them. You must know where they took her. They stopped answering my calls, she cried. After 2 days, they were gone. Changed their numbers. Disappeared. I thought they'd killed her. I panicked. I tried to forget everything, drink it away. But every time I saw a child, I thought of her. Hollis's breathing slowed as he processed her confession. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the horror of what she'd done. You realize what you've just admitted to, Amelia? He asked softly. She nodded slowly, her eyes hollow. I never meant for her to die, she whispered. I wanted to destroy Brian's peace, not take a child's life. But it got out of control. Hollis rose from his chair, the weight of her words sinking into the air. You said you think she might still be alive? Amelia looked up at him, her expression trembling between fear and fragile hope. I heard one of them brag once. Said they had a safe place for kids. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. But maybe she's still there. Names, Hollis said firmly. Give me their names. She hesitated, then whispered 3 names, unfamiliar, but enough to make Hollis's pulse quicken. As officers entered the room to take her back to her cell, Amelia turned once more to the detective. Her voice was faint, cracked, and almost childlike. Detective Hollis, she said, if you find Nora, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I never meant for her to get hurt. Hollis didn't reply. He watched as she was led away, her frail figure swallowed by the corridor's cold light. Outside, he stared at the dawn breaking over the city skyline. The case had taken a new, darker turn, but for the first time in 6 long months, there was a glimmer of something no one dared speak aloud until now. Oh, somewhere out there, a little girl named Nora might still be alive. The morning after Amelia's confession, the entire police station seemed charged with a kind of tense electricity, the kind that buzzes in the air before a storm. For the first time in 6 months, the name Nora Adams wasn't just followed by grief or guilt, it was followed by a possibility. Detective Hollis didn't sleep that night. He'd spent hours cross-referencing the names Amelia had whispered through trembling lips: Tommy Briggs, Luca Ade, and Silas Moore. Men with long criminal histories, each connected to small-time kidnappings, extortion schemes, and trafficking operations that stretched beyond county lines. They weren't amateurs. By dawn, a task force was assembled. Plainclothes officers in unmarked vehicles fanned out across the outskirts of town. They checked every address, every bar, every abandoned building the trio had once been known to frequent. 4 hours, there was nothing, until mid-afternoon, when a lead came through from a gas station clerk. A nervous young man had stopped by to buy food, paid with cash, and left in a hurry. The clerk recognized him from the wanted photo that had been quietly circulated among local shops. It was Luca Ade. He was seen heading down an old dirt road leading to the rural district of Maple Hollow. Hollis's gut tightened. Maple Hollow was a stretch of farmland that had been abandoned years ago after a flood wiped out most of the crops. Only a few decrepit structures remained, silent witnesses to time and decay. The detective immediately radioed for backup. "I want all units covering the east and west exits of Maple Hollow. No one in or out. We move now." As the convoy of police vehicles rolled toward the open countryside, the tension inside was unbearable. Hollis sat in the front seat, his hand clenched tight around the radio. In the back, Mr. Adams, pale, sleepless, and trembling, sat with his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had begged them to let him come. At first, Hollis had refused. "This is police work," he'd said. "You could get hurt." But Mr. Adams's response had been raw, almost feral. "She's my daughter," he said, his voice cracking. "If she's alive, I'll be there when you find her. Dead or alive, I'll be there." The conviction in his tone silenced any further objection. Now, as the fields rolled by in ghostly silence, his wife's tear-streaked face haunted him. He had promised her he would bring Nora home. They reached Maple Hollow just before dusk. The sky hung low and bruised, the setting sun casting a strange orange glow over the landscape. Broken fences lined the dirt road. The wind whispered through tall, dry grass, carrying the faint creak of an old barn in the distance. Then they saw it, a flicker of movement near a collapsed farmhouse at the edge of a field. Hollis raised his hand. "Stop the car." They parked quietly, stepping out one by one, their boots sinking into the soft earth. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its roof caved in, windows shattered, and a rusted weather vane squeaking in the wind. But from inside came the unmistakable sound of voices. 2 men, arguing. The officers took position. Hollis signaled one to circle left, another right. He approached slowly, crouched low behind a fallen beam. "Luca," a rough voice was saying, "we can't keep her here forever. If the lady's not paying, we cut our losses." "Cut our losses?" Luca snapped. "You think selling a kid's gonna make this better? You're insane." "Better than starving," the other replied. "You heard what Amelia said. No more money, no more deal. We can find a buyer." Hollis's blood went cold. The little girl they were arguing about. Nora. She was alive. He raised his hand and signaled. "Now." The door burst open in an explosion of sound and movement. "Police!" Hands in the air. Chaos followed. Luca tried to run through the back exit but was tackled to the ground. The second man reached for something under his jacket, a knife, but before he could raise it, an officer kicked it from his hand and pinned him down. Hollis stormed in, gun drawn. "Where is she?" he barked. Luca's face hit the dirt. "Please don't shoot. She's in the back. In the room behind the kitchen." Mr. Adams, who had been held back until the house was cleared, heard the words and broke free from the officers restraining him. He ran, faster than he'd ever run in his life, through the rotting hallway, past the broken furniture and peeling wallpaper, until he saw a door bolted with a rusty padlock. "Here!" Hollis shouted behind him. One officer handed over a crowbar. Mr. Adams's hands trembled as he jammed it into the lock and wrenched it open. The door creaked. The smell of damp wood filled the air. And then he saw her. Nora, curled up on an old mattress, wrapped in a dirty blanket, clutching a small toy, one he recognized instantly. Her stuffed rabbit. Her hair was longer now, tangled, her cheeks pale, but her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. Mr. Adams fell to his knees. "Nora," he whispered. "Baby, it's Daddy." Her eyes fluttered open, groggy and confused. For a second, she stared, and then recognition dawned. "Daddy," she croaked. He gathered her in his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm here, my love. I'm here. You're safe now." Outside, the officers led the captured men to the patrol cars. Luca, the younger of the two, kept his head down, tears streaking his dirt-covered face. "We didn't touch her," he muttered repeatedly. "We didn't hurt her. We were just waiting for the money." The other guy, Silas, he was the one talking about selling her. "Where's Silas now?" Hollis demanded. "He left yesterday," Luca said. "Said he was heading to the city to finish the job." The detective's stomach turned. "Get his description on the radio. Every checkpoint between here and the city needs to know his face." As paramedics examined Nora, she clung to her father, refusing to let go. Her small voice was hoarse, but she managed to whisper between sobs, "I missed you, Daddy. I thought you forgot me." He kissed her forehead again and again. "Never. I never stopped looking for you." When Hollis stepped into the room, Mr. Adams turned to him, tears streaming down his face. "You found her," he said. "You really found her." Hollis gave a small, tired nod. "She's strong," he said quietly. "Stronger than most adults I know." Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the crumbling farmhouse in color. Officers moved briskly, securing the scene, gathering evidence. But amid the chaos, a strange quiet settled, the kind that comes when a miracle happens after months of despair. As the ambulance doors closed and Nora was lifted inside, Hollis caught one last glimpse of her tiny face through the window. Tired, but safe. He exhaled deeply, the weight of 6 months lifting off his shoulders. But there was one thing still unfinished. Silas Moore. The third man. The one who escaped. Somewhere out there, he carried the last unanswered piece of the story, and perhaps the key to holding Amelia fully accountable for what she started. Back in the squad car, Mr. Adams sat beside Hollis, Nora's small blanket wrapped around his shoulders. "Detective," he said quietly, "I don't care what it takes. Promise me you'll find that man." Hollis nodded solemnly. "We will. For Nora." And as the sirens faded into the distance, the broken moonlight washed over Maple Hollow, the place that had swallowed a child and almost buried hope. Now, it stood as a silent witness to something else entirely. The moment a father's love refused to die, and the race against time finally ended with the sound of a heartbeat that the world thought was lost. The rain came down in sheets, drenching the countryside in a cold, relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the pounding hearts of everyone inside the convoy of police vehicles speeding down the muddy road. The windshield wipers swished furiously, struggling to keep up as lightning illuminated the horizon, a jagged streak cutting across the black sky. Inside the lead vehicle, Detective Hollis sat tensely, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Every second mattered. Every drop of rain felt like it was stealing time from a little girl's life. In the back seat, Mr. Adams stared out the window, his breath fogging the glass. His clothes were soaked, but he didn't care. The only thing he could see in his mind was his daughter's smile, the way she used to spin in her yellow floral gown, laughing at butterflies. He clutched her photograph so tightly it was nearly crumpled. He hadn't prayed in months. But now, his lips moved silently with every passing mile. "Please, let her be alive." The dirt road curved sharply before the farmhouse came into view, a crooked silhouette standing against the storm. Its roof sagged, and the wood was warped from years of neglect. A faint light flickered from inside, barely visible through the shattered window panes. Hollis slowed the car, switching off the headlights. The other vehicles followed suit. The team moved quietly, stepping out into the rain with flashlights and weapons drawn. The air smelled of mud and decay. Every footstep squelched in the soaked earth. "Fan out," Hollis ordered in a low voice. "Check the perimeter first. No noise." Thunder rolled overhead as the men spread across the property. Mr. Adams stood by the gate, heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to rush inside, to tear through the walls if he had to, but Hollis had insisted he wait until they confirmed it was safe. "Trust me," the detective had said. "We'll get her out. But we do it right." The rain intensified, drumming on the tin roof. The wind howled through the broken windows, making the house groan like something alive. Then came a sound, faint, almost lost beneath the rain. A soft humming. It was barely audible, carried by the wind, but unmistakably human. Hollis froze. Did anyone hear that? The officers exchanged glances, flashlights slicing through the darkness toward the source. The sound came again, a slow, fragile melody. A child's voice. The detective's throat tightened. He gestured for silence and moved toward the farmhouse, boots crunching on the gravel. The front door hung off its hinges, creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the smell of damp rot and stale alcohol filled the air. Empty bottles littered the floor. A single chair lay overturned beside a table covered in cigarette burns and old newspapers. The humming continued, clearer now. It came from the back of the house. Hollis raised his flashlight. Dust particles danced in the beam. Rope coils lay abandoned near the door, their ends frayed. A small pile of broken toys sat in the corner, covered in grime. Mr. Adams couldn't wait any longer. He pushed past the officers, ignoring their protests. His shoes slipped on the wet floor as he ran toward the sound. "Nora!" he shouted. "Nora, it's Daddy!" The humming stopped. Silence. Then, a faint rustle. The detective reached him just as they found the locked door. It was old, reinforced with a makeshift bar of wood nailed across it. A small hole near the bottom revealed a glimpse of darkness beyond. "Nora!" Mr. Adams whispered, dropping to his knees. "Are you in there?" For a moment, there was nothing. Then came a small, trembling voice. "Daddy!" His breath caught in his throat. "Yes, baby. It's me. I'm here." She sniffled softly from the other side. I thought you forgot me." Tears blurred his vision. "Never. Never. Sweetheart. I came for you. I'm here. Get this door open." Hollis barked. One officer swung his crowbar against the lock. Once. Twice. On the third hit, the wood splintered, and the door flew open with a sharp crack. The flashlight beams flooded the room. There she was, Nora, sitting in the corner on a dirty mattress, her tiny knees drawn to her chest. Her hair hung in tangled strands, her face pale and hollow, but her eyes, those bright, innocent eyes, still carried the faint spark of life. She was humming to a broken doll, one missing an arm. The doll's fabric was torn, stuffed with straw, but she held it close as if it were her only friend in the world. When the light hit her, she flinched. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt me again." Mr. Adams fell to his knees. "Nora, it's me. It's Daddy." Her eyes widened. She blinked as if unsure whether she was dreaming. "Daddy!" He crawled to her, tears pouring down his cheeks. "I'm here, baby. I found you." And then she dropped the doll, her little body trembling as she stumbled forward and threw herself into his arms. He held her tight, tighter than he ever had before, afraid that if he loosened his grip, she might vanish again. His cries echoed through the broken farmhouse, raw and unrestrained. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I should have protected you. I should have." She pressed her face against his neck, whispering weakly, "It's okay, Daddy. I knew you'd come." Behind them, Hollis turned away for a moment, swallowing hard. Even the officers lowered their flashlights, giving father and daughter that fragile moment of peace amid the wreckage. Rain dripped through the holes in the ceiling, pattering softly on the floor. The storm outside raged on, but inside that ruined house, a warmth returned, a spark of life that had been missing for too long. As medics entered the room, Nora clung to her father, refusing to let go. "Don't make me leave you again," she whispered. "You're not going anywhere without me," he said, holding her tighter. "You're safe now. You're never leaving my sight again." They wrapped her in a blanket, checking her pulse, her temperature, her fragile wrists still marked from the ropes. The doctor shook his head in disbelief. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, but alive. She's going to make it." Hollis radioed in the confirmation, his voice shaking slightly. "We've got her. Repeat, the girl is alive. She's safe." For a moment, the entire team stood silently. The sound of the rain seemed distant now, muffled by the overwhelming relief that filled the air. Mr. Adams carried Nora out of the house, shielding her from the rain with his own coat. As they stepped into the open, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "It's cold." He smiled through his tears. "That's just rain, sweetheart. We'll be home soon." Lightning flashed behind them, illuminating the ruined farmhouse one last time, the place that had stolen 6 months of innocence, now reduced to a memory. As the ambulance doors closed, Nora's small hand clutched her father's tightly. She looked up at him and said softly, "Daddy, I wasn't scared. I knew you'd come." He kissed her forehead, whispering, "Nothing in this world could have stopped me." The sirens wailed as they drove away, fading into the storm. And for the first time in months, the rain didn't feel like mourning. It felt like cleansing, washing away the horror, the guilt, and the silence that had haunted them all. The little girl was home. The morning after the rescue, the town of Mayfield woke to the sound of sirens and rain-washed streets. The news spread like wildfire. Nora Adams had been found alive. People who once whispered doubts now gathered outside the hospital, holding flowers, toys, and banners that read, "Welcome home, Nora." Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with both relief and heartbreak. Mr. and Mrs. Adams sat side by side in the dim hospital room, watching their daughter sleep. She looked fragile, her small frame lost under the white sheets, her face pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly beside her, a steady rhythm that seemed to reassure them she was really there, breathing, alive, safe. Mr. Adams brushed her hair gently off her forehead. "She's so thin," he murmured. His voice trembled, breaking under the weight of everything he'd been holding in for 6 long months. Mrs. Adams held his hand, her eyes red from crying. "She'll get better," she whispered. "We'll get through this, together." Doctors came in and out, speaking in calm, low tones. Nora was severely malnourished and dehydrated, but miraculously, there were no signs of serious physical injury. Still, the trauma was deep. The doctors warned that she might not speak about what happened for a long time, if ever. When she woke later that afternoon, the first thing she asked was, "Daddy, can I go home?" Tears welled up again in Mr. Adams's eyes. "Soon, sweetheart. I promise." In the following weeks, the investigation turned into a full-scale trial. The entire community seemed to hold its breath, waiting for justice to be served. Every day, the courthouse steps were crowded. Reporters with microphones, cameras flashing, neighbors whispering. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had orchestrated one of the cruelest deceptions the town had ever seen. Amelia Hart. Once known as the soft-spoken church choir girl, she now looked like a shadow of her former self. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes hollow. When she was led into the courtroom, wearing a wrinkled beige prison uniform, a wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Beside her stood her defense attorney, silent, knowing the mountain of evidence stacked against her was impossible to climb. Across the room sat Mr. and Mrs. Adams, holding hands, and behind them, Mr. Bryan, the dog owner who had been wrongfully accused. His face was lined with exhaustion, but he sat upright, his expression calm. 4 months, he'd been the subject of suspicion, the whispers, the looks, the police interrogations. He'd lost his job, his home, and nearly his sanity. Now, he was finally going to clear his name. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the prosecutor began. "Your Honor," she said, her voice firm, "this case is not just about a kidnapping. It's about a chain of cruelty, lies, and revenge that nearly destroyed an innocent family, and almost cost a child her life." She turned toward Amelia. The defendant, Amelia Hart, orchestrated the kidnapping of 7-year-old Nora Adams, not to ransom her, not out of desperation, but to frame her former lover, Mr. Bryan, as revenge for a personal grudge. A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor continued. She paid 2 known gang members to abduct the child. She instructed them to steal a gown belonging to the victim and bury it under the dog kennel at Mr. Bryan's former residence, a deliberate act meant to mislead police and the community. For months, she watched the chaos she had caused, until the guilt finally broke her. She turned to face the judge. "Your Honor, this is premeditated deceit, calculated cruelty. Amelia Hart may not have harmed the child directly, but she tore apart lives and nearly destroyed them." Amelia sat motionless, her eyes downcast. Then came the testimonies. From the police, the neighbors, even one of the gang members who had agreed to a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Their words painted a picture of greed, obsession, and vengeance. When it was finally her turn to speak, Amelia stood slowly, trembling. Her voice cracked as she addressed the court. "Yes," she said, "I did it. I wanted him to feel what I felt." She pointed toward Mr. Bryan. "He used me. He told me he loved me, and when I got pregnant, he left me. I lost my baby. I lost everything. He walked away like it was nothing." Tears streamed down her face as she screamed, "He ruined my life first." The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court." But Amelia wasn't finished. "You all think I'm a monster? What about him? He lied to me, made promises, left me barren and alone. I didn't want to kill that little girl. I just wanted him to suffer." Her voice broke into sobs, her body shaking violently as officers restrained her. The courtroom was silent. Mr. Bryan stood slowly, his voice low but firm. "You're right, Amelia. I hurt you. I made mistakes. But what you didn't just hurt me. You hurt an innocent child. You buried your pain by creating someone else's." For a moment, she looked at him, and something in her face softened. Regret flickered there, just briefly, before her expression hardened again. After weeks of hearings, the day of judgment finally came. The courtroom was packed to capacity. People lined the corridors, waiting to hear the outcome. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, looked over the courtroom before reading the verdict. "Amelia Hart," he began, his voice steady, "this court finds you guilty of conspiracy to kidnap, obstruction of justice, and planting false evidence." Amelia's hands shook as he continued. "You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison without the possibility of early parole." Gasps filled the room. The judge turned next to the 2 gang members, who stood silently at the defense table, their faces blank. "For your role in the abduction and unlawful detention of a minor, this court sentences you each to 25 years imprisonment." The gavel struck. "Court is adjourned." Amelia screamed as the guards moved to escort her out. "It's not fair," she cried. "He ruined my life first. Why should I be the only one to suffer?" Her voice echoed through the courtroom as she was dragged away. Mr. Bryan sat motionless, his eyes closed. For the first time in months, he felt the weight of suspicion lift from his shoulders. The judge had declared him innocent, officially clearing him of all involvement. He turned toward Mr. Adams and whispered, "I'm so sorry for what happened to your little girl." Mr. Adams nodded slowly. "We all suffered because of her lies. But justice was done today." Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks, painting the wet pavement in gold. Mrs. Adams held Nora close as reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. But the family didn't stop to answer. They just kept walking, hand in hand, through the crowd, past the noise, toward their car. Mr. Bryan stood nearby, alone. He watched them leave with a faint smile, not of happiness but of peace. Maybe now, he thought, they could all start to heal. As they drove away, Nora looked out the window at the fading courthouse and asked softly, "Mommy, is the bad lady gone?" Mrs. Adams nodded, brushing her daughter's hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. She's gone. She won't hurt anyone again." Nora leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "Good," she whispered. "Then maybe the dog will stop barking now." Her parents exchanged a quiet look, one filled with both pain and relief. Outside, the town slowly returned to normal. But for the Adams family, normal would never mean the same thing again. Still, as the sunlight spilled across their faces, there was hope, fragile but real. Justice had been served. And for the first time since that silent evening 6 months ago, peace finally found its way back home. The days that followed the trial were quiet, almost too quiet. The chaos that had gripped the Adams family's home for months had finally subsided, leaving behind a silence that was not peaceful, but hollow, the kind that made even the ticking of a clock sound loud. Nora was home again. The same child who had vanished without a sound 6 months earlier now sat by her window each morning, staring at the sunlight as it filtered through the curtains. But she wasn't quite the same. She barely spoke. She flinched at sudden noises. And she never, ever let the lights go out at night. Her room, once filled with laughter, was now bathed in a soft, constant glow. A small lamp sat by her bedside, always on, even during the day. Her mother, Mrs. Adams, didn't argue. If light made Nora feel safe, then light there would be, always. Some nights, when the power flickered or the wind howled outside, Nora would rush into her parents' room, trembling. "Don't let them take me again," she'd whisper, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Adams would pull her close, holding her tightly, whispering back, "No one's taking you, baby. Not ever again." Healing came in waves. Some days were better than others. Mrs. Adams, who had once been a ghost of herself, sleepless, grieving, half alive, now began to smile again, though her smile carried the weight of what she had lost and regained. She'd sit beside Nora in the afternoons, brushing her daughter's hair slowly, gently, as if afraid she might break her. The strokes of the brush made soft sounds in the quiet room. "You have the same hair as you did before," Mrs. Adams would whisper. "Soft and beautiful." Nora would look up, her eyes distant, as if trying to remember a time before the darkness, before the farmhouse, before the fear. Then, ever so slightly, she'd nod. Sometimes, Mrs. Adams would find her sitting on the porch, her skipping rope tangled in her lap, staring at it with a puzzled expression, as though she couldn't quite understand what joy it used to bring her. There were moments when laughter returned, hesitant and fragile. The sound of cartoons from the television. The smell of her favorite cookies baking in the oven. The warm feeling of safety, slowly rebuilding itself inside 4 familiar walls. While mother and daughter rebuilt their rhythm of life, Mr. Adams carried his healing in silence. The day after the sentencing, he walked alone to the neighbor's abandoned yard, to that place that had haunted his nightmares since the day he found the torn gown buried beneath the earth. The old dog kennel stood there, weathered and empty, its wood splintered and its roof leaning. The weeds around it had grown tall, as if trying to reclaim the memory of what had been uncovered there. Mr. Adams stood before it for a long time, staring. The air felt thick, and though it was broad daylight, shadows clung to that spot. He remembered the day, his trembling hands clutching the shovel, the earth giving way, the flash of red fabric, and the scream that tore out of him before his knees hit the dirt. That image had lived behind his eyelids every night since. Without thinking, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. At first, he just touched the wood, feeling the rough texture under his palm. Then, suddenly, rage, deep, primal, and raw, surged through him. With a shout, he kicked the kennel hard, sending it toppling to one side. The door broke off its rusty hinges. He kicked again, and again, until the wood cracked and splintered. His hands followed, pulling, tearing, breaking. Each blow seemed to release months of helplessness, the nights of guilt, the questions that had no answers, the soundless disappearance that had stolen his peace. By the time he stopped, the kennel was nothing but a pile of broken planks and twisted nails. His breath came heavy, sweat mixed with tears on his face, but his chest felt lighter than it had in months. He sank to his knees in the dirt, hands trembling, and whispered, "You'll never haunt my family again." For a long time, he just knelt there, listening to the wind. It moved softly through the grass, like a sigh, or perhaps forgiveness. 2 days later, he returned. This time, he carried a small rosebush wrapped in burlap. The flowers were white, his wife's favorite color. Nora followed behind him quietly, clutching a small watering can. Together, they stood at the same spot where the kennel once stood. The ground had been cleared, the debris gone. "Daddy, why white roses?" she asked softly. He looked down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Because white means peace," he said. "And because this is where we let go." He dug carefully, the soil soft and dark. Nora watched, her small hands gripping the watering can tightly. When the hole was ready, they lowered the rosebush into it. Mr. Adams covered the roots with earth, pressing it gently down. "Now," he said, "let's give it water." Nora poured slowly, her hand steady despite her small frame. The water soaked the ground, darkening it around the delicate green stems. They stood there silently for a moment. The petals moved slightly in the wind, gleaming white under the afternoon sun. Mrs. Adams joined them then, slipping her hand into her husband's. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Nora crouched beside the plant and whispered something none of them could hear. When her mother asked what she'd said, Nora smiled faintly and replied, "I told it thank you for bringing me home." Mrs. Adams bent down and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "You're home, sweetheart. And you're safe." Weeks passed. The town began to settle again. The story that had once dominated every whisper and headline became something spoken of in hushed tones, a dark memory that everyone wanted to move past, though it had changed them all. At the Adams home, change came slowly, gently. Nora began to laugh again, quietly at first, then louder. She started helping her mother in the kitchen, drawing butterflies on paper, sometimes even running barefoot through the grass in the backyard. The first time she skipped rope again, Mr. Adams stood at the window, tears welling in his eyes. Mrs. Adams joined her daughter outside, clapping along, the sound of joy filling the air once more. But the dog kennel was gone. In its place, the white rosebush bloomed. Every morning, Nora would check on it, watering it carefully. Sometimes she'd talk to it, telling it about her dreams, about her toys, about school reopening soon. And as the petals opened wider each day, it was as if the ground itself was breathing again. Justice had been served in the courtroom, yes, but the real justice, the deeper one, was unfolding quietly within the Adams family. Forgiveness, not just for those who had wronged them, but for themselves. Mr. Adams forgave himself for not hearing that night. Mrs. Adams forgave herself for the guilt she had carried. And slowly, they forgave the world for the cruelty it had shown them. Because in the end, Their daughter, their light, had come back to them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nora stood by the rosebush, watching the petals glow faintly in the fading light. Her father joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Daddy," she asked, "do flowers feel pain?" He looked down at her, smiling gently. "No, sweetheart. Flowers feel light. They grow toward it." She nodded thoughtfully. "Then I want to be like the flower. I don't want to be scared of the dark anymore." He knelt beside her, tears forming in his eyes. "You already are, my brave girl. You already are." They stood there until the last light disappeared from the sky, the scent of roses drifting through the air, soft and pure. And in that moment, beneath the white petals, in the yard that once held only grief, peace finally bloomed.